Alright guys, so this is not a topic that I would typically make a video about. It is going to be a fairly serious style video, but I feel like I really have to talk about this because this is the single biggest change that has ever come to old school RuneScape. And I mean that wholeheartedly. As a maxed player who spends 80% of my day with a blowpipe in my hands, I feel like this is something that I can and should talk about. So some of you may have heard whisperings of a big equipment rebalancing. Jagex did release a survey about a week ago, although they did it pretty quietly, so I feel like it hasn't been as big a topic of discussion as it should be. Today, however, they released the official blog on the topic here, and I'm not going to jump the gun and call it trash out of the gate here because I agree that there do need to be some changes on equipment. And this is just the first iteration of suggested changes, and Jagex is historically quite good at, listening to players and incorporating feedback. So I have no doubt that we will see some tweaks in the future. Thank you for listening to us, Jagex. But anyway, they have released a list of changes I'm going to go through here. Some are minor, some are really major, and we're just going to go down the list and talk about what we see.
Don't even think for a second, nigga, you might need a moment. You were only given one shot like a buzzer beater, but you stoned it. Brick house, brick house, brick house, brick house. Living bricks at the studio, hit the brick on the house.
Okay, so the first thing here is a tier system rework, and as far as this goes, I honestly think this is a good idea, because currently once you hit level 75 in a combat skill, guess what? You've unlocked every single item, and Jagex worry is that the really high-end PVM items like the T-bow, the scythe, and the Sang staff are much more powerful than the worst weapons that you unlock at this level, so it's just a little bit confusing as to why they'd have the same requirements. And if you look at it from an XP perspective, the highest tier they're proposing here is 85, I think, for the T-bow and the scythe, which I think is totally appropriate, right? 85 is a quarter of the way to 99. That is 25% of the way to max level for the most powerful weapons in the game. And what I think really scares people here is that old school is fundamentally different from a lot of other MMOs in regards to how power creep works, because in World of Warcraft per se, with every new X pack, they get 10 levels on their character and each raid brings a new tier of gear. And because of this, they've had number squishes in the past, but technically this is, an infinitely repeatable formula. It works for them. RuneScape is the opposite. We stop at level 99. There are no expansion packs. There's no new levels. 99 is the end. So people, I think, are worried that if we release a new tier of gear, then, every tier release gets that much closer to 99, which is the ultimate end of the road with nowhere left to go, and power creep has won. And that is a legitimate concern, but guys, we have some room here. We can be a little bit pragmatic, right? Even if Raids 3 brings more tier 85 gear, or even tier 90 gear, raid tiers last like 3 years, so we have a little bit of wiggle room. And it seems the recent trend is to make gear which has, niche uses like Inquisitor, where it's best in slot and, the content it comes from and a few other places, but not necessarily in the wider game, which I do think is a pretty good method. And they talk about this a little later in the blog, so I don't want to stall too much on this, but overall, I actually agree with this. I think this is a positive change for the long-term game health. Now, second here, they're bringing up a couple nerfs to some various items throughout RuneScape, which first off is the Nate is not face guard. And I'm gonna be honest, guys, I don't know why they added this in the game. It pretty much trivialized the Serp Helm, which its only uses now are Zulrah for lazy people and Iron Men, and TOB, if you're too lazy to one-way switch into a blowpipe to kill the purple crab on Verzik. But they want to bring the face guard back down to 5 strength to match the Serp Helm, which I agree. I think the Serp Helm actually should be better than the jaw because it has a cost of use and the face guard is completely free. Plus I want to flex my mutagen. We're gonna lose a max hit in a few scenarios here, but overall I honestly don't think this change is particularly important. It's still gonna be a good helm for triberding since it has no negative bonuses. And I don't really think this is going to change the landscape too much. I still expect to see mostly face guards. Next thing they're going to be nerfing is the Twisted Bow. And I think conceptually this is a very well designed item. They're just essentially raising the tier to 85, which first of all, is absolutely deserved, and removing the prayer bonus, which I am sad about, but to be honest, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have that anyway, since, you know, it's not a god item. But I mean, I would like to see like one pray bonus on it just because it's such an elite item, but really not a huge deal. The reason they're pretty much leaving the T-bow alone is because the damage scales essentially with the boss's magic levels. So it's really, really easy to balance future content around this. You know, if they don't want it to be T-bowscape, they can make the T-bow not good against it while still keeping range and effective style. Overall, this gets a thumbs up from me. I think this is good game design. And then a couple things I want to gloss over here are the Black D'hide and the Din's Bulwark nerf. They're once again nerfing both of these things, but I'm not gonna lie, this essentially has zero effect on the PvM scene, so we're gonna let this one slide because the next one up is a big one. Rest in peace, the Toxic Blowpipe. Okay, I am being a little bit dramatic, but this is a ginormous proposed nerf to not only the Blowpipe, but in effect, it's a big buff to endgame content. They have designed all of the current endgame content around this single item, and I think the Blowpipe is too strong as a general use weapon. I really do, and I think that's something that should be changed, but what they've proposed here, in my opinion, is too much. This will radically change the landscape of later game PvM. It will in effect destroy the meta because, I mean, Jagex didn't really understand what they were releasing 6 years ago, but it's a little too late. Anyway, here are the proposed changes to the stats. So the attack bonus is going from 60 to 30, and the base strength bonus is going from 40 to 25. So they are essentially cutting the base stats almost in half, and also nerfing all of the darts. Now, the goal is to make it so that the Blowpipe isn't just straight up better than everything else, and there are circumstances where maybe you'd want to use an ACB in an offhand, or as they mentioned a little bit later on, making crystal armor viable, which are really good goals. I think we should aim for that, but there are better ways to do it. A good suggestion I saw is, change the damage of the darts only and make it kind of a scale where bronze through Addy, which are kind of the lower tier darts, are decently worse than they currently are. Rune is going to be only slightly worse than it currently is, and Dragon will remain the same. This rewards people who are willing to spend a lot more on supply costs, and they can keep their damage high while not completely destroying the Blowpipe as a whole. And this wouldn't be good for Iron Men, I don't think, and that should definitely be taken into account. But maybe they could add a way to reliably get dragon darts, and that would help balance out the cost increase that would come with this change. And that's a pretty raw idea, but I think it definitely can be good if we tweak the numbers. The second idea that I saw, which I think would be the most fair for everyone, to be honest, is pretty much leaving old content alone and not changing the Blowpipe outright. Instead, they can tune future content by requiring an offhand for certain monsters, making them weak to bolts or arrows, or even adding like a recoil effect to monsters, so you'd be encouraged to prioritize fewer larger hits over the constant smaller ones of the Blowpipe. Now, none of these are perfect, but I think there are still a lot of options to be explored, and I'm not saying I have answers, but I am saying there's a lot to discuss. And my main worry with this, like I stated earlier, is just the outright buff to content, specifically content like the Inferno, where you use the Blowpipe for 95% of it. And I think this is going to discourage a lot of blooming PvMers away from content like the Inferno, and maybe even things like raids to an extent. And all that's going to happen now is that Pink Clay is going to make a lot more money. I mean, that dude is already stoked for PvM diaries. Jagex is just getting ready to pay this dude's mortgage. And on top of that, releasing this rebalance with the PvM diaries is literally just going to move all the challenges up a tier, right? If the nerfs are substantial enough and they release it at the same time, I feel like they're going to end up reworking the PvM diaries post-release, which is just going to make everyone mad who did it with the nerfs. And the whole thing is just, it could get really messy. So I think Jagex really has to tread carefully here. All right, I'll get off my soapbox here. The rest of the blog is fairly unimportant as it deals with a lot of lower tier items that most players won't even be using after like a month of playing. It does mention a buff to crystal armor here, which I'm actually okay with that. I think this is a good idea because currently it's pretty dead. There's like 2 places that people use it. That's Sire for killing vents and Hydra for the prayer bonus. But, you know, I would like to see this implemented actually, because I think there is a good potential for crystal armor. Anyway, guys, I am very much interested to hear your thoughts on this. I know my comment section has a really wide variety of players from just starting out to ultra endgame, and this affects all of us. So please drop your opinion in the comments. Tell me what you think, possible suggestions you have, anything your little heart wants to shout from the mountaintops here. Anyway, that is going to be it for me, guys. I just wanted to release this really quickly and go over it so everyone kind of knows what's going on. Remember to like this video, boys. I want this one to have as much discussion as possible. I will definitely be responding to all of you that I can. So stay safe out there, my flavor family.